like saying, why should I buy your fridge instead of their fridge? How do I know your fridge is going to keep my veggies crisp longer? Well, the refrigerator manufacturers could give you data. Spiritual people are going to be able to give you data, but not data that's tangible in the same way. See, science has given us a very, very small repertoire of tools that it considers acceptable for proof. We have machines that weigh, scales. We have beakers that measure volume. We have telescopes that see things far away, microscopes that see things that are very small. We've got a handful of different tools and instruments that are considered acceptable to prove science. You cannot use any of those instruments to prove God. No microscope, no telescope, no beaker, no scale. And so if you use that perspective, you can't prove God exists. And so the question scientifically arises, well, why should we believe? But the whole premise is wrong. Nobody is saying accept the presence of God on blind faith, like I'm going to buy your refrigerator even though you haven't proven anything to me. It's not that. It's that which proves to us that God exists simply isn't a tool that science considers part of its repertoire. But that doesn't mean it's less than real. My favorite way of thinking about this is think about love. Raise your hand if you've ever loved anyone. Anyone. Great. Everyone. So if I say to you, I don't believe you, prove it to me. You love your mom? Really, prove it to me. Why should I believe you? How could you possibly prove that? Could anybody actually prove? Any way you could possibly prove to me that you loved someone?
When I think of them, I smile. I smile.
But how do I know you're thinking about them and not chocolate ice cream? I mean, if you say the way I prove it is because when I think about them, I smile. Well, from my scientific tools, which are my eyes, all I can see is you smile. Maybe you're thinking about a chocolate ice cream cone. How do I know what you're thinking about? You can't prove to me what you're thinking about. You see the problem? Maybe you're not really smiling. Maybe you're just fake smiling. Right? Any other ideas of any possible way to prove that love exists? Yeah.
Their needs become more important than mine.
Beautiful. So, a lot of us suffer a kind of martyrdom complex, an inferiority complex that somehow we are not worthy, and therefore we put others' needs ahead of ours. A lot of us have a core need to actually be loved and accepted and appreciated, and therefore we put others' needs ahead, that somehow if I do what you want, you're going to love me. Now, I'm purposely slamming all of your ideas, not because I don't think they're nice, but to make you understand that there isn't actually a way to prove it. You could say, well, I hug them, I kiss them, I buy them things, I cook for them. And I could sit here and come up with every other possible explanation for why you hug or kiss or cook for them or buy them things. You cannot actually prove that love exists. Now that shouldn't bother you. This was just a game. That should not bother you. Because you know that you love them. Your inability to prove it to me does not change the fact that you know you love them, right? I mean, nobody here has doubted that you start loving, that you're actually loving just because you can't prove it to me. You know you love them. Okay, you can't prove it, no problem, but you know it's true. How do you know it's true? Because you have an experience inside. And the experience might lead you to have tears in your eyes. It may lead you to want to serve them in such a way that their needs become more important because you actually take joy because of how you feel about them. It's internal. It's an experience inside. So is the presence of God. Which is why people who have an experience of God are not bothered by the fact that you can't prove it. I've never seen a spiritual or religious person say, oh, you can't prove God exists. Well, all right, then I'm just going to stop believing. All right, you convinced me God doesn't exist. Because we've had the experience of God. We know God exists. Cannot use the five senses, cannot use a beaker or a scale or a tape measure to prove it. But that's okay. Because we don't need to. Because there's no rule anywhere that says every single thing on earth must be subject to the tools of science, or it doesn't exist. The only people who say that are scientists. Which is the only place that you get into a little bit of the science and spirituality debate. Because they actually overlap in most places, interestingly. The only place that they start to disagree is over jurisdiction. Science says we have jurisdiction over everything. Spirituality says you have jurisdiction over that which can be understood through your tools. But you do not have jurisdiction over that which cannot be understood through your tools. God cannot be understood. At this point, who knows? Maybe we'll come up with better tools. Better tools that will actually start to be able to see the soul. Who knows? Like I can see my arm. Maybe somebody's going to come up with some invention that will enable me to look at you and actually see your soul, not just feel it. To actually see God in every blade of grass, in every tree, in every being. Who knows? Maybe somebody will develop these beautiful glasses that we can use, or some way of attuning our eyes. But until then, that's why we meditate on the third eye. The third eye is the tool to see the divine. It's why the meditative practices have us meditating on it, focusing on it, in order to open that eye. It's called the Agya Chakra, this energy center that shows us truth, divinity. So this is your tool. If you want to know that God exists, work on opening your third eye. But until you've had a personal experience of God, why believe? Well, as I said, it's perfect that the question arose on World Happiness Day, because what we know is that people who are spiritual, actually, and this is science, actually tend to be not only happier but healthier than those who don't. And they've done all kinds of studies at top institutions like Duke and Dartmouth and Princeton and all sorts of really reputable institutions around the role of spirituality, faith, to our physical health, to our immunity. There's a lot of studies around it on your psychological health. So even if you haven't yet had the experience of God, but you're looking to be happier, to find a deeper source of happiness, you certainly don't lose anything by believing. It reminds me of, there used to be a comic strip when I was very young, and I used to read the comics before going off to school when I was growing up in my parents' house in LA. And there was a comic strip called Calvin and Hobbes that I used to really love. And I remember one of the strips was Calvin setting out cookies and milk for Santa Claus. Calvin was a little boy. And his pet tiger, Hobbes, his best friend, says to him, "But you don't believe in Santa Claus. Like, why are you setting out cookies and milk?" And Calvin says, "Well, I'm not fully sure that he doesn't exist. And just with that little bit of possibility that he might, I thought, well, why not at least make him my friend?" And you could think about that in a way, on a deeper level, of course, with the divine, that even if you haven't yet had an experience of God, if you've got even a tiny percentage that says, well, maybe God exists, I'm just not fully sure. Well, why not? Take the chance and see what you can do to connect with God. You don't lose anything. Look around. Look at the spiritual people, sages and saints and mystics and prophets and whatnot of every religion throughout history. At how they lived, at their level of inner peace, happiness, resilience in the face of so much that affects and afflicts them. And maybe there's something in that you think, I could stand for some equanimity. I could stand for some joy. I could stand for some peace. I could stand for some ability to forgive. I could use some more compassion. I could use some more deep joy. Why not? Why not? And just go into it with that feeling and just try. Just see. Act as if. Chant kirtan. Meditate, pray, serve. As though there were a God. And you were just waiting to meet him, her, it. And see what happens. What I know happened for me, and I've seen happen for so many, is in that space of simply being open. Simply being open. Nobody's talking about blind faith. Simply being open to the possibility. Grace flows. And then you find a level of happiness that you never thought was possible. So the reason you should believe is because that belief itself is the path to greater happiness, to greater peace. And along the way, through believing, you actually also find an experience, and then you have even more joy, and even more peace, and even more deep experiences. Other questions? Yes.
Ruma, when we know that God is bliss and we are a bliss in ourselves, we touch that moment of euphoria and then we come back to that zero state. So when we know we are that, we are bliss, why can't we be in bliss 24/7?
Great. So she said, when we know that we are one with the divine, one with God, and that God is bliss, and therefore we are bliss. Right? We talk about Sat Chit Anand. Well, that Anand is bliss. Joy, great joy. When we know that we are that, why can't we live in bliss 24/7? Because of the ego and ignorance. If you could live 24/7 in the true self, you'd live in bliss 24/7. The problem is that we don't live in the true self 24/7. The ego comes in. We're there, we're fully connected, we're in bliss. Then we get a text message or a WhatsApp or an email or a phone call. And somebody says, God, you'll never believe what so-and-so was saying about you. You know I shouldn't tell you, but you're really a good friend of mine, so I thought, let me just be honest with you. Or you go on social media and you see someone who seems so much happier than you because they are wearing certain clothing, or they look in a certain way, or they are smoking a certain type of cigarette, or drinking a certain type of something, whatever it may be. And you look at that, and the mind starts going, oh, that's not fair. Why not me? And then you're stuck. And then you keep scrolling, and then there's somebody else who also looks happier than you, and you're getting sadder by the moment, and the people you're looking at are getting happier by the moment. And you forget, I am bliss. Now all you can think is, oh my God, I don't look like this, I don't have that, I didn't go there, I haven't achieved this. And you're totally stuck in Maya again, completely wrapped up in sticky Maya. And that's why we're not blissful. People talk about Maya as a veil, and she is. But on a very personal level, I have found her to be like a sticky veil. If you ever could think about sort of, taking this and covering it with some kind of goopy, glue, sticky stuff. That's what it feels like. Because a veil, you think just, and I'm free. But Maya's more like, she sticks, right? So we get ourselves wrapped up in this sticky, veil-like illusion. And we lose the fact that we're bliss. And that's why the only way to maintain it is by staying conscious, staying present, staying in the true self. This is why we practice mindfulness. It's why we practice being conscious and aware. Because when I'm conscious and aware, then there is bliss. But when I'm unconscious and unaware, then there's misery. Any other question? Yes.
What's the relationship between soul and the rebirth?
Soul and the? Rebirth. The relationship of soul and rebirth. The soul is that which takes new bodies in each birth. Now, on the superficial level, we say your soul keeps reincarnating in different bodies. But the truth is somewhat deeper and more subtle than that. that sounds like there's lots of souls. You have a soul, I have a soul, she is a soul, she is a soul, just like we all have different bodies. The truth is there's actually only one soul. It's just soul. Think of an infinite ocean. It's just soul. We're not each like ripped off chunks of the divine. We are waves, temporary waves in an infinite ocean. And this is why we speak about Jivatma. Jivatma is my individual soul in a body. So you have Atma, soul, infinite. Then you have the soul when it attaches itself to a form, to a body, for a particular karmic journey. Another way to think about it, none of these analogies is exactly perfect, but they all help us circle around the truth and get closer and closer to it. Another way to think about it is the ocean. And you have drops of water that evaporate from the ocean. They get carried by clouds. They drop in different places. And then they return to the ocean. Gravity is that which is pulling every drop of water on earth back to the ocean. That's why water always goes down. Water is returning to its source, always. So if you think about water that's evaporated from the ocean, gets carried by clouds, some of it drops in the Himalayas, becomes Ganga, Yamuna, people bow to it. Some of it drops in a sewer, people plug their nose as they walk by and sweep it away. Some of it drops in a swimming pool, some in a field. But it's all going back to the ocean. It's all ultimately ocean at its source. The core of that water is ocean. It's just been covered with a different form. The water in Ganga is covered differently than the water in a sewer, which is different than the water in a swimming pool. But the essence of each of them is the same. And it is ocean. And ultimately that drop will return back to the ocean, merge back with the ocean, and there will no longer be any distinction. And that's what we can think of as moksha. When the drop finally returns to the ocean is when you're done with your cycles of birth and rebirth. So the soul takes on a new body, but the soul doesn't travel alone. The soul travels with what we call the subtle body. The subtle body is made up of man, buddhi, and ahankar. The mind, the intellect, the ego. Not what we know, but the impressions in our mind. So for example, you're going to have to go through arithmetic and geometry and calculus and all that stuff again next life. You don't get to hold on to it. You're going to have to learn foreign languages again. You'll have to learn to play the piano again or play basketball again. Or the skills that which you know are part of the physical brain. They die when the body dies. But man is the subtle, energetic aspect when we speak about sanskaras. Impressions. They're not impressions just in our physical brain. They're impressions on, you can think of it like on the psyche. Impressions upon man, upon the intellect, meaning our way of thinking. Our way of being. This is why we do practices. Meditation, japa, seva, puja. Because they purify the mind and the intellect and the ego. The soul is pure. But this subtle body that's carrying all of this is what's traveling from incarnation to incarnation. That's making us take these different bodies. The sadhana you do impacts not only your physical brain, but also your energetic subtle body. And that stays with you. That's why the meditation and the sadhana that you do actually stays with you, because it impacts the subtle body. We take our next birth based on what we've done in the past. That's the law of karma, very simple. But we also take it based on what situation is going to be the most conducive for us, our Jiva Atma, to take the next steps of shedding its karmic package, finishing its karmic package, so that it can be done and it can just merge back into the infinite ocean in moksha. So that's why we keep doing this. And what it reminds us is, whatever you're struggling with, so many of us like to procrastinate it or numb it or ignore it or deny it. And, as I always say, the universe is really patient. But if you're going to have to deal with it at some point, why not now? Because you don't get free of it by dropping the body. You'll just come back and deal with it next life. So you might as well deal with it now. So you can be freer in this life also, and in upcoming lives. A lot of times people, you see, it's beautiful to understand that we have many lives and to have faith in that. But a lot of times it can actually lead to a level of just complacency, of sort of, well, why bother? Anyway, next life will be better. And I'll just, sort of grin and bear it and take it. And with God's grace, next time will be better. And that's not the purpose. We're not here to just grin and bear it and make it through so that next life will be better. We're here to co-create every minute of this very life. Because next life is only going to be better if you make it better in this one. Whatever you don't clear in this one is going to be there with you in next one. So if you want next life to be better, it's going to be better only by working through that karmic package, working through the blockages, working through the ego, working through the illusion in this very life. And then you may not even need another life. Then you can be what we call Jiva Mukti, free, moksha, while you are still in the body. Walking, moving, living, still in the body, but free. So it's a beautiful goal to work for. Yeah.
What is the difference between focus, attention, and awareness?
Great. Focus, attention, and awareness. What is the difference? Well, I don't have my handy dictionary here, so I can't give you the official Webster's distinction. But from my personal experience, focus feels to me, even though the word can be a noun or a verb, for me it's more of a verb, meaning bringing your attention. To me, I feel like attention is the noun, focus is the verb that enables us to bring the attention to a point. So normally our attention is all over the place, right? And you notice it here. This room makes a lot of noise, and every time the door opens, everybody goes, right? It happens all the time. Somebody opens their bag to get a cough drop or a chapstick or whatever it may be. A zipper opens, and everybody goes like we've never heard a zipper open. So attention is all over the place. It's why we are so easily distractible. Because our attention is essentially floating out here, waiting for something to interest it, waiting for something to attach it to. A sound, a sight, a smell, something. What can I pay attention to? Right? Focus is that which enables us to gather our attention, which is floating all over the place, and bring it to one point. So if you say be focused, to me what that means is gather your attention and bring it to one point. Hold your attention in one point is what you would call being focused or being attentive, paying attention. One point, one place, all of your focus, all of your attention. Awareness is much softer. I can't get an A on an exam simply by being aware of what's going on in my class. So think about it. Let's say I'm sitting in a classroom and the teacher is speaking and doing mathematical problems on the board. My focus enables me to grab my attention away from the people around me, what they look like, what they smell like, what they may be doing. Takes my attention away from my phone, away from my rumbling stomach that wants breakfast or lunch. And it brings all my attention to what the teacher is saying, what's going on the board. I'm able to focus. Awareness is not only of the chalkboard. Awareness is of my breath, of my body, of every aspect of what is happening. Awareness is a very soft, but I think of awareness as kind of a spreadable thing. Sometimes I speak about a soft blanket of awareness. And that's for me a very felt sense experience. When I sit down to meditate and I first bring my awareness in, I can almost feel this very, very soft blanket kind of come in, and I'm aware first of the breath. And then that blanket just starts spreading out over me, and I find myself just aware in a spaciousness of awareness. This kind of like you get into bed and you've got this very soft blanket, and as it covers all of you, the body goes I feel, for me, and again, this is just a felt sense, awareness is that which is soft, it's subtle, it can be broken and then brought back. But it's not usually the single-pointed focus that you think of as attention. So here's another way to think about it. If you look at the 8 limbs of yoga given to us by Patanjali. So we begin with yam and niyam, how we live in the world. I won't go into that now. Then we have asana, using the body. Then we have pranayam, using the breath. Now watch what happens. Pratyahar, a withdrawal of the senses. Why? Because the senses are in many ways that which we are attentive to. My attention goes where my senses are, what I see, what I smell, what I hear. Wherever my senses are, so is my attention. So I draw my senses in. It brings in that attention. It enables me to become focused inside. We then come to that single-pointed focus, right? Dharana. Single-pointed focus. Now I've withdrawn and I am now focused, attentive on one thing. A mantra, a candle flame, my breath, a word, a name of God, whatever it may be. But I'm now on one thing. But then something very interesting happens. Then we go from dharana into dhyan, meditation. Now, instead of getting narrower and narrower, the shift into dhyan is I become one with that upon which I am meditating. So I'm focused on a mantra, my breath. Now suddenly, rather than getting narrower and narrower, now we become one. Now we merge. Now that experience shifts into what I call awareness. Now there is a spreading of awareness that is beyond the one thing I was focused on. Now I don't need to worry about my senses and the attention. Now I'm all here. I've withdrawn it inward. And now an experience of actually merging and expansion happens. When you move into dhyan and then samadhi, well, that's an expansion, not a contraction. So we bring it in, it anchors, and then we start to expand in a merging. The meditator, the object of meditation become one. I am chanting God's name. I am watching my breath. And then suddenly there is no watcher. There's just breathing. I've become one with it. I'm meditating on the divine. I'm chanting my mantra. Then suddenly, there's no me chanting a mantra. There's just the mantra. And that expansiveness of experience. And so awareness becomes, in this case, you could use awareness and consciousness interchangeably. It's this expansion of pure awareness, pure experience, pure consciousness. As we move into dhyan and samadhi, that merging into bliss. So focus and attention I think of as things that bring us inward and bring about a contracting movement. Whereas awareness is that which for me is very expansive. So if you said to me, pay attention, my mind would go. If you say, be aware, my mind goes like that. Beautiful. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your evenings. Are you with us tomorrow? Okay, then we'll take it just before we go. Yes, no problem.
From your perspective, how do you see the councils overseeing us as part of the divine?
How do I see the?
Councils
councils. What sort of councils?
The councils above,
You mean like angels?
beyond the angels.
Like divine beings, you mean?
Yes.
How do I see them in what way?
From your perspective.
Huh. So, when you think of the divine as infinite, it becomes very easy to think of that infinite divine present in a lot of different ways. And so whether it really is a tree, a blade of grass, a sacred river, a river not considered sacred, but a river nonetheless, a human being, or an unembodied spirit presence. Devi, Devta, angels, whatever word we may use. I don't think of it so much as a hierarchy, but the idea that there are spirits, and whether they are associated with an aspect of soul that used to be in a body that we knew and is no longer in the body but is spirit in the spirit world. Absolutely it exists. There's so much that we are unable to see simply because the tools of our eyes are not good enough. But we know that so much exists that our eyes can't see. That's why they invented microscopes. I mean, microscopes are built on the premise that there's a lot to see that our eyes can't see. But we also know there's a lot to see that even our microscopes can't see. For me, that's not a challenge to believe in. I very much feel that there's presence of different aspects of divine energy. And so whether it's the energy that we call soul of a being we loved who no longer has a body, or whether it's a Devi, a Devta, however we may think of the divine beings, absolutely they're there. Absolutely. And available, accessible, there to be connected with, to know that we're never alone. Yeah, absolutely. And it's a beautiful opportunity because since these eyes can't see them, we have to focus on opening up our inner eye. And since these ears can't hear them, we have to focus on opening up our inner ear. And so trying to connect to soul, spirit, angel, however you may think of those beings, is a beautiful opportunity for us to work on opening up inside because we know they exist. It's just these physical tools aren't able to connect with them. So we go deeper. Yeah, beautiful.
There is a saying that our inner world is what is being reflected in the outer world. So how can we, but when we see it in our everyday life, when we see it as a reality, it doesn't appear so.
Tomorrow we'll talk about that. Tomorrow our first question is, they say that the external world is a reflection of our internal world. What we see inside is what we create outside. But why does it always not seem like that? कल उसे शुरू करेंगे. Have a beautiful